Hello, Kentucky. Jonathan Masters, Hudson, Kentucky. I'm going to be talking about the Kentucky legislature. We passed a bunch of laws. 67 new laws have been passed. This is 2015. The legislature just had a 30-day summer camp. 30 days, they all gathered together, and they passed 67 new bills. And so that's, 67, whole laws, but each one of those new bills actually changed a whole host of laws. In fact, I would say there's probably about hundreds, maybe thousands of laws that have actually just recently been passed. And if you're going to sit there and tell me that every single county attorney in 120 counties are all going to read these 67 bills so they know exactly where the new laws are and where the old ones were, if you're telling me that they'll read all these new 67 bills, they will read the Kentucky and the American Constitution, and they will meld all this information together, and then they will all be on the same page, you're absolutely ridiculous. We have 120 county private pocket tyrannies. They're all on different pages. We're not on the same page. We're not operating by the same rules. Everybody is doing their own thing. I would actually pose to you, not only just ask your average police officer if they know the Bill of Rights. What's the 10, amendments to the Constitution? They don't know them. Ask what the 8th Amendment is. Just ask them, hey, do you know what the 8th Amendment is? They won't know what the 8th Amendment is. Kentucky has 26 sections. We have 26 sections of a Bill of Rights of the freedoms and personal freedoms that we have. Kentucky's Constitution actually increases our rights and our freedoms. The Section 4 says we have a right to a revolution. So there's 26 sections of freedom that we have in Kentucky's Constitution. Your Kentucky State police officers don't know about any of those 26 sections. They probably don't even know the 8th Amendment, the first 10 amendments to the U.S. Constitution, let alone Kentucky's Constitution. And now on top of all these laws, since we have a federal system, right, there's two governments that's dueling for power. On top of those two government, the federal and the state governments, now we have 67 new laws that Kentucky has just passed. Everybody's going to read these. We're all going to be on the same page. I call bullshit. I call such bullshit on that. There's 67 new laws, and the Kentucky's media has only covered about a handful of them. Most of these laws I had to read for myself and interpret them and try to make some sense out of them. If there is no article written about it, I don't know the intent on many of these laws. But I did read every single one of the laws that were passed, and I have analyzed them, whether I think they are good or bad or confusing or what I had thought about them. So, to begin with, okay, so there's 67 new laws, but there's also some more laws that were passed, and the way the governor works is the legislature writes the bills and the governor signs them, but the way the Kentucky's governors, the way it works is if he doesn't explicitly veto it, if he doesn't say that's a bad bill and he doesn't sign it, then it still becomes law. For some reason, it still becomes law if both of the houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives pass a law and the governor doesn't sign it, but he also doesn't veto it. He's kind of putting his hands up and he's letting the bill go on through and it becomes law. So, there's about 4 or 5 extra bills that are going to come out, and they're big bills. These are huge things. There's a campaign finance bill. So this is, right now, as a lieutenant governor candidate, I'm only allowed to accept $1,000 donations from any individuals. Well, what's this going to mean? Now I can get $2,000 and $3,000 donations. I don't even like going around begging and asking average working class Kentuckians for a dime. We got to fight hard for our money out here. So if they was to raise it to $2,000 or $3,000, that doesn't benefit me. That benefits them. That benefits the people who gets, all those corporate dollars, all that Koch brother money. So, there's also a DUI interlock law. They've made the DUI laws harder. These are laws that have been passed it hasn't been posted yet, but they've been passed, after, or the day of the deadline. It just hasn't been, put up yet. So there's more laws than what I've already analyzed, but we'll go with what I've analyzed, for right now. So the 3 bills I want to talk about to begin with, and I think I can probably talk on and on about this, but I got to make it pretty short and curt so that way, doesn't bore the shit out of you, right? But, there's 67 new bills. I'd say about half of them are pretty decent. I didn't see anything really wrong with them. There's one bill that wants to recognizes the aluminum industry. And that's it. That's all it does. It doesn't have it doesn't recognize it for a purpose. It just recognizes it. So Kentucky has an aluminum industry. It's there. It's been recognized. And now there's a law that says it's been recognized. So I don't know if somebody was saying, no, there's no industry there. Yes, there is. No. Well, now there's a law. So now there's no question whether or not, it's hard to argue with recognizing an industry. So, that's a good bill, but it's sort of pointless. We wasted our time for that. So that's one of the 67 bills that had got passed. But the three bills I want to talk about the P3 agreement, which didn't get passed, the Student Super Bill, HB 236, which also did not get passed, and then the heroin bill. The heroin bill, which did get passed, and it's probably one of the biggest issues that most people know about, and so, pay attention, because this heroin bill is pretty sweeping legislation. So, let's start with the P3 agreements, okay? The P3 agreement is private-public partnership, PPP. That's where the P3 comes from. Private-public partnership. That's what government really is right now. That's the definition of fascism according to FDR. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when he was asked to define what fascism was, it says, the liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerated the growth of private power to a point where it becomes stronger than the democratic state itself. So private, corporate, tyrannical power, when it becomes stronger than the state, that's when the liberty of a democracy is at stake. That in its essence is fascism. Ownership of government by one individual, by a group, or any controlling private power. So when a private group, when the corporations, when the corporate and the government become one, that's fascism. That's when democracy is out the door. That's basically what we have now. We have oligarchies. We have a plutocracy where it's legalized bribery. In order to get campaign contributions, in order to run, you got to get campaign contributions, and you get your corporations, bankers, the 1%, handing all this money out to the candidates. And once you get all that money, you think you're going to be, not bought and paid for. It's possible. Teddy Roosevelt, the bankers gave him some money, and they said we bought him, but he didn't stay bought. But in general, if somebody gives you $1,000, you are expected to, advocate on their behalf. And I don't think that's crazy to actually assume that's the case. But it's all for the wealthy anyway. So that's what this P3 legislation is going to be. It's going to be straight up fascism. It's going to be straight up fascism. There's no pretenses anymore. It's just corporations and governments going to be one together in unison. Something interesting about the P3 agreements, they had signed a bill, the P3 bill, like last year, but they wrote an amendment on it saying that you cannot collect tolls. So a lot of people say that this is a fig leaf. The P3 agreement is just a fig leaf to allow the toll bridges to come in. So that way a private business can buy the tolls, they make money, the government gets, some sort of, I don't even know why they would do that. Fuck the toll roads. Fuck toll roads. I'm 100% against toll roads. No, we should not be taxed. There's plenty of money in the road fund. There's plenty of money in the federal dollars. We can get this money, without having to double tax. That's double taxation. They already taxed us one time, and now they're going to tax us again. It's just, drive through Chicago. You have to go through like 5 different tolls just to get to where you want to go. You want to talk about slowing down traffic. You're going to have traffic just slowed down for miles. So I think it's a horrible idea. I think it's a double taxation, and I would be 100% opposed to it whatsoever. And so actually they had wrote an amendment saying that we will not pass the P3 agreement unless you guarantee us that it omits tolls. You cannot have tolls. And they killed the bill. Steve Beshear vetoed it. He actually vetoed the bill because he wasn't able to get toll bridges. And Sandy Overly was part of this too. So Sandy Overly and Steve Beshear were for toll roads. And that's what this P3 agreement is. Public-private partnership. Corporatism. Straight up totalitarian fascism. And I do want to talk a little bit more about the other 2 bills. I'm gonna talk about them coming up, okay? because I want to end this off with just talking about fascism. What is fascism? To me, a fascist, when I say that's a fascist, it's just a violent psycho. It's a person who says, hey, you need to give me that pen or else there's going to be trouble. And they threaten violence. It's an order with the threat of violence right behind it. So it's somebody who says, you got to do what the hell I say or else I'm going to hit you. That's a fascist, okay? It could be, a lot of people use it differently, and you should use, common definitions for words, or you're not even having a real conversation. So, the student, just real quick, the student super bill was knocked down. That's bullshit. But it wasn't the Republicans. I was actually hating on CB Embry, and I still don't care for the guy because, he wants to discriminate against transgendered in order to get this super bill passed. But Robinson had added a political and religious freedom amendment to it. Why would the House Democrats, why would they be against religious and political freedom? This just shows exactly where the students are in Kentucky. You're nothing. You're nobody. They even allowed it. They even changed it. The Senate did change the bill. They said that you could have a seat on the superintendent screening committee, but you're not allowed to vote. What's the point of having a seat if you have no vote? You're only one of 6 or 7 anyways. It's not much power, and they're already trying to strip it and take away even more power. The point is, students are nobody. This is Frankfort, the legislators at Frankfort clearly coming out and saying, Kentucky students, you're nobodies. Fuck you. You don't deserve political or religious freedom. You don't deserve a seat on the superintendent screening committee. You don't matter. Shut the fuck up, sit down, and do as you're told. You have no ability to make decisions for your own life. We'll tell you what to do, and then once you get 18, we'll push you out, and then you're supposed to be a superstar. I wish I did have the 2 things I would have said at the rally is just 2 things, but it's Howard Zinn. The problem with America is not disobedience, but obedience. Obedience in the face of war, slavery, genocide. Historically speaking, it's been blind obedience to authority that has caused the worst atrocities in human history. Slavery, genocide, war. Just shut up and do as you're told. And the other part is there's only 2 human natures. There's only 2 ways to look at human natures. Or human nature. You could sort of have a synthesis between the 2, but either you're, a Hobbesian sort of, we're all born evil and you got to smash people to be good, or you're a Rousseauian and you say that our human nature is good. And so you got to just, nurture and fertilize that which is good in our hearts and souls. And so that's my take on it, is there's only 2 views of human nature, but it's overwhelming that with fascist totalitarianism that that our culture has decided that we're all born evil and that you got to be smashed into subservience. I disagree. I think that if you're 5 years old, you could be taught to be a leader. And if you're 5 years old being taught to be a leader and you've been practicing being the leader from the time you're 5 to the time that you graduate, time that you're 18, you've had 13 years of practicing of being a leader. Are you going to be better equipped at leading when you become an adult, or would you be better if you were just sit down, shut up, do as a sycophant? If you're just a sycophant, you think you would those who get bullied are the ones that have problems in the world. Bullies don't have problems because, they say, do as I say, and they know how to sort of get their way, even though it's not, it's not kosher. It's not very cool how they get their way. But it's those who get bullied that doesn't get their way. So actually, our school system is smashing 100% compliance. They smash the humanity out of the students, and they don't actually care for them. Frankfort clearly showed that. And it was the House Democrats that wouldn't go and allow the students of Kentucky to have political and religious freedom. I'm an atheist. But I don't care if someone just wants to pray before their meal. I don't care. You want to, talk about Jesus, that's fine. And I like the idea because it protects political speech. Children, they're not adults, but they have student rights, they have American rights, they have children's rights. So I think it's absolute bullshit that they killed the student super bill. And, but again, it just shows exactly what Frankfort is. The heroin bill, it's even worse. It's basically the white collar mafia enrichment bill. They're getting more money for themselves, more money for the prosecution and the judges and the jailers and, all these assholes that's going to just put a heroin addict through the cleaners. Well, what, you're addicted to heroin? Well, let's just put you through the cleaners. That'll get you clean, right? If we beat you up and treat you like shit and get a felony, record on you, no, it'll ruin their fucking life. And we've done this. We've done this a million times. Kentucky has had problems with methamphetamines, right? Crystal meth, all the trailer parks, with the blowing up meth labs and stuff. You have heroin, you got pillbillies, you got moonshiners. This is, we have a long history of prohibition in the state, but we also have a long history of doing whatever the fuck we like. If we're not hurting and harming everybody, then what's it matter? 50 of Kentucky's 120 counties are dry, but we have moonshiners. We got Dukes of Hazzard type, Joe Kennedy. He was a moonshiner. They were running alcohol during Prohibition, and marijuana is the number one cash crop. So, Kentucky is sort of schizophrenic when it comes to this. There's a lot of people thinking that if you could just beat the crap out of these, heroin addicts, then that'll help everybody. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked for about 20 to 30 years. It'll never work. It never will work. And so we need to pull our heads out of our asses on that. So, fascism. This is what fascism is according to Mussolini. Okay, so Mussolini, he's the originator of fascism. He's the one that came up with fascism, right? He's the one that defined it and crystallized it and says, here is what fascism is. So I'm going to end this video off with just Benito Mussolini. And this is, we have Italian right now. Let's see. Actually, I'll do a plug here. I have this Southern Peach, the original pecan nut brown ale. So it turns out you could probably ferment anything, but fermenting pecans is fine. This is alcohol, one of the worst drugs. I just went to the local store, bought it. No big deal, right? No big deal at all. Now, I just, ingested some alcohol. I just took some drugs. Now, my contention is that I drank this on my own free will. I'm my own American. And if somebody was to come into my house and beat the shit out of me, throw me in jail, mock me, laugh at me, rape me while I'm in jail, charge me all these fines and all these court costs because I did this, I'm not the criminal. I'm not the criminal. You're the fucking criminal. If you're the one that just beat the shit out of me and just ruined my fucking life because I just did that, you're the criminal. You're the asshole. I did nothing. I didn't hurt anybody. You did. And so that would make you the fucking criminal. And that's important. That's absolutely important because that's absolutely vital. Our tactics to attack the supply, to attack the alcohol as if that'll ever work. It hasn't worked. Every alternative to the war on drugs has been successful. Everywhere the war on drugs has been implemented has been an absolute failure. And it didn't just stop. There's the DUI interlock law. There's the NyQuil law. So they actually made NyQuil and Robitussin illegal. So, there's a lot of really crappy laws that Frankfurt has passed. There's good laws. Don't get me wrong. I told you the good one, the recognizing the aluminum industry. That's a good law. But this is basically the best way to get the law passed is for you to not know, for the public to not know about it, have a secret bill, doing a smoke-filled backroom deal, sign the bill, make the language very confusing to where people won't even want to read it. They don't know what's going on. And actually, they're kind of the best hiding spot for Kentucky's legislature is right out in the open. So right out in the open. They publish all the stuff that they say that they're going to change, but they don't actually publish the actual laws that they change. They just give a general description of it, but it's there for the public to read. Probably nobody in the media, nobody in Kentucky reads these damn things. Even the Frankfurt legislatures was sitting there saying that they don't read the bills. I forget who the guy was. I want to say Gooch, but I don't know for sure. But he was like, oh, I don't even know what the hell's in these bills. And that's how they do it. Committee passes it. Their friends want to pass a bill. They want to pass a bill. I'll pass your bill if you pass my bill. And then, we have all this sort of Frankenstein, concoction of all these different competing, contradicting laws on the books. So I want to end it off just with fascism, okay? So fascism is bullshit. Fascism is the opposite of socialism, liberalism, and democracy, okay? Granted that the 19th century was a century of socialism, liberalism, and democracy, this does not mean that the 20th century must also be the century of socialism, liberalism, and democracy. This is Benito Mussolini, the Italian, right? The Italiano. This is just like the coaches for UK and U of L, right? The Italians. And they invaded Africa too, and then used free slave labor, which is what we have the Italian, the Italians are doing still today, right? Free labor, corrupt multi-million organizations, but who cares, right? If one or two Kentuckians are elevated. But so this is Benito Mussolini saying specifically socialism, liberalism, democracy are the opposites of fascism. Now he goes into some mysticism here, so I'm just going to read his words, okay? And then I'm just going to say, good night, sweetheart. So the fascist conception of the state is all-embracing. Outside of it, no human or spiritual values can exist, much less have value. Thus understood, fascism is totalitarian. The fascist state, a synthesis and a unit inclusive of all values, interprets, develops, and potentiates the whole life of a people. We are free to believe that this is a century of authority. A century tending to the right, a fascist century. If the 19th century is a century of the individual, liberalism implies individualism. We are free to believe that this is the collective century and therefore the century of the state. So it's all about the state. Everything in the state, nothing against the state, nothing outside the state. Fascism is a religious conception in which man is seen in his immanent relationship with the superior law and with an objective will that transcends the particular individual and raises him to conscious membership of a spiritual society. Whoever has seen in the religious politics of the fascist regime nothing but mere opportunism has not understood that fascism, besides being a system of government, is also, and above all, a system of thought. This is what fascism is. This is what is coming to Kentucky with the P3 legislature, with the P3 legislation. They say, let the corporations and government join hands and run roughshod over the rest of the people. My understanding of what government does is that it can be a tool for the people. That's why corporations and bankers are afraid of the government, because we can actually use government to make these corporations and these bankers and these 1% to treat us right. We can use the government as a tool for us, for we the people. And that's why they're against it. That's why they always say it's the government's the problem, because they understand that capability, that potential. So government should be there because, unbridled capitalism isn't going to solve anything. What is unbridled capitalism going to solve? It hasn't solved pollution. It hasn't solved poverty. We got homelessness all over the place. We're one of the poorest states in the union. 1 million poor, 10,000 homeless children in Louisville. And 1/4 of our people are poor. The capitalism has not worked for Kentucky. And it hasn't worked for Kentucky the entire time. It worked for some of us, but it's not working for all of us. The fact that we have poverty, the fact that we have homelessness, especially children, it just clearly shows that capitalism has failed. Capitalism has failed when it comes to pollution. If you can pollute the waters and get away with it, that's good for business. War, death, destruction, these are also good for business. Earthquakes, whenever there's death, destruction, you need people to build and make more things. That's good for capitalism. You got people working, people are moving and shaking. Good for capitalism. Not good for society that there's war, death, disease, destruction. So clearly capitalism, unbridled, will destroy us. We almost destroyed the entire world in 2008. And that was the Republicans, right? Let the bankers do whatever the fuck they want to do. And then that'll be, that'll bring an era of just goodwill and lots of money to everybody. Well, our wages are stagnant, okay? The way American people working and poor classes are getting by is working longer hours, borrowing more money. The jobs aren't getting better. They're having to put more effort into it. That's how and eventually it's not sustainable. The last point I want to make about capitalism is capitalism intentionally has to maintain a poor class. Someone has to work these shitty jobs, right? Someone's got to work these minimum wage jobs, cleaning up floors and cleaning up children's puke, right? Someone's got to do these crap jobs, and so therefore poverty has to be maintained, so you could drive a group of people to such desperation that they'll be willing to work for pennies, work for breadcrumbs, pennies on the dollar, and so that way they'll be cheap labor. And that's what the Republican class war is going to bring in. They're going to have unbridled, laissez-faire, casino-style capitalism. And they don't believe that government should check it. And actually, we have a Democratic governor right now who's actually pushing for the P3 legislation. So basically, we have the Democrats and the Republicans who are in favor of big corporations and banks and 1%. They all love the rich. They all love the 1%. They are all corporatists. They are fascist. Just as Benito Mussolini had defined it. They're all fascist. There's a point where Benito Mussolini had came back, and he was a socialist for a long time, but eventually he came back to being a nationalist. So his idea was sort of, we're all a bunch of poor Italians, but after World War I, we're still poor Italians, but we're Italians. And we'll always be Italians. And that somehow, to him, Mussolini being Italian was more important than being part of the, proletariat, of the working masses. So he was saying that essentially the nation as an entity, he was against nationalism, but the nation had not disappeared. We used to believe that the concept was totally without substance. Instead, we see the nation arise as a palpitating reality before us. Class cannot destroy the nation. Class reveals itself as a collection of interests, but the nation is a history of sentiments, traditions, language, culture, and race. Racism is very important to fascist, national fascism. Steve Brashear, Dawson Springs, you got the headquarters of the KKK, right? So that's our governor. That's our governor's hometown, and he's also a bigot. Our governor is against gay people. Big shocker that those who are against integration are also those who are against, gay people too. It's bigotry. It's discrimination. Cover it up in any way that you want to cover it up. It's the same thing. People are allowed to be, they're allowed to be themselves. If they're gay, they're allowed to be gay. If they're black, they're allowed to be black. Quit being such judgmental fucks. So, he says that the nation hasn't disappeared. Instead, we see the nation arise as a palpitating reality before us. Class cannot destroy the nation. Class reveals itself as a collection of interests, but the nation is a history of sentiments, traditions, language, culture, and a race. Class can become an integral part of the nation, but one cannot eclipse the other. So he's saying that class is important, but nationalism is also important, and he's getting caught up in all this nationalism. The class struggle is a vain formula without effect and consequence wherever one finds a people that has not integrated itself into its proper linguistics and racial confines. Again, race, where the national problem has not been definitely resolved. In such circumstances, the class movement finds itself impaired by an inauspicious historic climate. I don't know if I agree with anything that he is actually saying, but it's, food for thought. The nation doesn't disappear, but he's a racist piece of shit, right? And he was kind of saying that the nation should have been defined, and if it wasn't defined, then it needs to be defined. I don't know. Malcolm X said nationalism was how all revolutions had happened too. So this would be the last thing. This is Benito Mussolini's definition of fascism. In 1932, Mussolini wrote, with the help of Giovanni Gentile, an entry for the Italian Encyclopedia on the definition of fascism, okay? So this is fascism. This is something, I remember, hey, you're a fascist. Oh, I don't care about that. Well, why not? Why don't you know what the fuck a fascist is? Because we live in a fascist nation, and fascism looks very much the norm. It's very much the norm. You don't treat people the way you want to be treated yourself. You don't respect their, ability to create culture. You just smash them, shut your damn mouth, and do as I say. That's what a fascist mentality is. To destroy humanity, to not be able to, the will to power, they want their will to trump your will. Instead of saying, hey, let's not be each other's slaves. Let's just treat each other like, people. So, fascism. Benito Mussolini. And this went on and on, so this is gonna go on forever. I'll try to make it more informative, so that way I'm not just sort of ranting here and there. But this is important. I mean, this is P3 legislation that the Democrats are putting forth. So the Democrats are the ones sitting there going with the Nixonian war on drugs, Ronald Reagan, Nixon's war on drugs. They're suing the EPA. They're the ones saying, let's go corporate. Let's have corporatism. They're the ones running the police state. They're fucking Republicans. They're fascist fucking right-wing Republicans. I mean, what the fuck? There is no choice in Kentucky. It's either vote for a Republican, or vote for a Democrat, Republican. Democrats, especially Steve Beshear and Jack Conway, are Republican light. They're Republican light. I can't tell you what liberal issues Jack Conway actually believes. He gives lip service here and there to a couple issues, but for the most part, I mean, he's absolutely wrong when it comes to prisons, when it comes to wars, when it comes to police brutality. He is in favor of, lots of bad things, but it's fascist, it's totalitarian fascism. It's what equips the jailers to rape whoever they want to rape. That's the society we live in, and that's Benito Mussolini. And my understanding of Democrats is that they're liberal. Sometimes people say that they're weak or namby-pamby, and that there's a lot of times the country goes back and forth, but it goes to like a strong father figure, and then it wants a mother figure because, it can be a little bit easier, right? And so I think Democrats should embrace their liberal values and be progressives and say, look, this is what I stand for, and take their licks. All right, so straight up, just a definition of fascism, Benito Mussolini. Fascism, the more considers and observes the future and the development of humanity quite apart from the political considerations of the moment, believes neither in the possibility nor the utility of perpetual peace. Fascism is against peace. It thus repudiates the doctrine of pacifism, born of a renunciation of the struggle and an act of cowardice in the face of sacrifice. War alone brings up to its highest tension all human energy and puts the stamp of nobility upon the peoples who have the courage to meet it. War is great. Teddy Roosevelt said the same thing. It brings up the highest tension of all human energy. War. Jack Conway never met a war he didn't like. He was for the wars under the Republicans, for the wars under the Democrats. He loves war. He would have been in favor of Vietnam. Let's just keep fighting Vietnam till the end. What's it for? Who cares? Right? Love it or leave it. No, I clean my house because I love it. Not because I hate it. I clean my house and I take care of my house because I love it. In fact, it'd be quite the opposite. Well, love it or leave it. Well, we can clean it up. Hey, love it or leave it. Leave that pile of shit in the middle of the floor. You love it or leave it. No, I'm going to love the house, not like the pile of shit. And then I'm going to get the pile of shit out of the house and then, love it even more. That's why, I clean my house because I love it. So let's keep on going. All other trials are substitutes, which never really put men into the position where they have to make the great decision, the alternative of life or death. The fascist accepts life and loves it, knowing nothing of and despising suicide. He'd rather conceive of life as duty and struggle and conquest, but above all for others, those who are at hand and those who are far distant, contemporaries, and those who will come after. Fascism is the complete opposite of Marxian socialism. Marxist socialism is the opposite. Those are the opposites. Fascism is right-wing, right? So when you hear Mitch McConnell saying, oh, Obama's a socialist, he is talking about fascism. He is a fascist. He's a corporate fascist, just as Benito Mussolini defined it. The definer of what fascism is. The grandfather of fascism. The materialist conception of history of human civilization can be explained simply through the conflict of interest among the various social groups and by the change and development in the means and instruments of production. Fascism now and always believes in holiness and heroism, that is to say, in actions influenced by no economic motive, direct or indirect. And if the economic conception of history be denied, according to which theory men are no more than puppets carried to and fro by the waves of chance, While the real directing forces are quite out of their control, it follows that the existence of an unchangeable and unchanging class war is also denied. The natural progeny of the economic conception of history, and above all, fascism, denies that class war can be the preponderant force in the transformation of society. After socialism, fascism combats the whole complex system of democratic ideology and repudiates it, whether in its theoretical premises or in its practical application. Fascism denies that the majority, by the simple fact that it's a majority, can direct human society. It denies that numbers alone can govern by means of a periodical consultation, and it affirms the immutable, beneficial, and fruitful inequality of mankind, which can never be permanently leveled through the mere operation of a mechanical process such as universal suffrage. So he's against democracy, he's against socialism, he's against food for the people, he's all about fascism. Fascism. Fascism denies in democracy the absurd conventional untruth of political equality dressed out in the garb of collective irresponsibility and the myth of happiness and indefinite progress. The myth of happiness. There's no such thing as happiness, indefinite progress. We can't always progress. Given the 19th century was a century of socialism, liberalism, democracy, I read this part. The foundation of fascism is a conception of the state, its character, its duty, and its aim. Fascism conceives of the state as an absolute in comparison with which all individuals or groups are relative, only to be conceived of in their relation to the state. The conception of the liberal state is not that of a directing force guiding the play and development, both material and spiritual, of a collective body, but merely a force limited to the function of recording results. On the other hand, the fascist state is itself conscious and has itself a will and a personality, thus may be called the ethic state. The fascist state organizes the nation, but leaves a sufficient margin of liberty to the individual. The latter is deprived of all useless and possibly harmful freedom, but retains what is essential. The deciding power in this question cannot be the individual, but the state alone. All is about the state, all about Kentucky, all about the United States. For those nationalists, it's America, love it or leave it. You don't love Kentucky. What the fuck did Kentucky ever do to you? Now you're sitting there saying that America trumps your Kentucky nationalism. You're more of an American than you're a Kentuckian. Which one's more important to you? Because that mattered in the Civil War. So that's also a contradiction. Here's my Confederate flag and my American flag. You're a goddamn walking hypocrite. The Confederates warred against the United States. Which side would you have been on? So, there's no way that anybody's actually thought about nationalism, to the degree that I have. But that matters. That matters. Are you a Kentuckian at all? What does it mean to be a Kentuckian? Is it different than being an Ohioan or a West Virginian? Are we all Americans in these stupid state boundaries? This doesn't mean anything. Should we all just be one nation under Obama, under Barack Obama? Should that be, or is it, are we Kentuckians? Are we Kentuckians? And does being a Kentuckian mean something? You love it or leave it, right? What? America or Kentucky? Which one? Because if Kentucky disagreed with America, which side would you be on? What matters to you? Being a Kentuckian, being American? I like both, right? I like that I'm born and raised here, but also like all these interstate systems, right? We could drive all the way out to Oregon if we want to. But it's all about the state. For a fascist, it's all about the state. Fuck the individual. Fuck who you think you are. Fuck the insignificant peasant ants. It doesn't matter. The state above all else. For fascism, the growth of empire, that is to say the expansion of the nation, is an essential manifestation of vitality, and its opposite a sign of decadence. Peoples which are rising again after a period of decadence are always imperialist, and renunciation is a sign of decay and of death. Fascism is the doctrine best adapted to represent the tendencies and the aspirations of a people like the people of Italy, who are rising again after many centuries of abasement and foreign servitude. But empire demands discipline, the coordination of all forces, and a deeply felt sense of duty and sacrifice. This fact explains many aspects of the practical working of the regime, the character of many forces in the state, and the necessarily severe measures which must be taken against those who would oppose this spontaneous and inevitable movement of Italy in the 20th century, and would oppose it by recalling the worn ideology of the 19th century, repudiated wheresoever there has been courage to undertake great experiments of social and political transformations, for never before has the nation stood more in need of authority, of direction, and order. If every age has its own characteristic doctrine, there are 1,000 signs which point to fascism as the characteristic doctrine of our time. For if a doctrine must be a living thing, this is proved by the fact that fascism has created a living faith, and that this faith is very powerful in the minds of men, is demonstrated by those who have suffered and who have died for it. So fascism, that's Benito Mussolini's definition of fascism. So the state above all else. P3, right? Let's have Kentucky make all these agreements with corporations whenever they feel like it, not to put it in check. The government, for the people in power in Kentucky right now, the government is there not to check corporations and the 1% of the bankers. It is to lay in bed with them. It is to be with the bankers and the 1% of the corporations, to look at Kentucky and say, what resources can we take from this state? What dirt, what coal, what natural gas can we take out of this state for ourselves and enrich and profit for ourselves? And then we need cheap labor. So let's bust the right to work. Let's bust the unions. Make sure that working class people have absolutely no say so. Make sure there's no minimum wage. And that way we'll be able to hire these cheap, dumb, poor, backward, $7 an hour hillbillies to do all the hard, shitty labor that we corporatist, capitalist, fascist, totalitarian assholes don't want to do. The government should be there to protect us. It shouldn't be with the corporations to foist them upon us. I think we need both capital and labor. You need your corporations and you need your workers. You need them both. But this P3 legislation says that they don't give a shit about the working class people. There's no more coal miners unions. No unions in the coal mines because, the coal miners are not brothers. They don't believe in solidarity. They don't believe in being together, and they don't believe in helping their own community. They're brainwashed, and they love their massa. They love their corporate massas. And it's our coal. That's Kentucky coal. That's our damn coal. And that's why we should nationalize it, keep our coal for ourselves. If you're cold and there's coal out there, go out there and chip yourself a couple chunks of coal for yourself and put it in your stove. Do not freeze. We're a coal state. In fact, our electric should be virtually free if we were doing it right. But Kentucky Utilities is owned by William H. Spence, who's out in Pennsylvania. So all the profits of Kentucky coal goes to William H. Spence's pocket, not Kentucky's. And so that's what Mitch McConnell was talking about. He's talking about fascism. Benito Mussolini's type fascism, and so are the Democrats, and the Democrat leadership at least. So I guess if you have a choice between Republicans and Democrats, you have to choose fascist, imperialist, corporate fascist. You have to pick, which imperialistic corporate fascist do you like better, right? Which are the least of the evils? And that's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. So, God, I can't believe I talked that long about Mussolini and fascism. There's so many more bills that I need to talk about. But this is important. This is an important conversation. This is what the media should be talking about. And just because you have to make choices, right? There's priorities. So I talked about the P3 legislation because I saw in Frankfurt they had a big billboard and it said, why not? Let's do P3, private-public partnerships. Why not? Why would you be against it? Hey, man, it's cool. No, it's not cool. It's straight up totalitarian fascism. They already have contracts today. I mean, right now, private industry, there's contracts. I mean, they already have contracts. Governments contract people out to build sewages, to do the roads, to do construction. They have contracts. So I don't even know why we need legislation that says that it's okay for them to have public-private partnerships. There already is private-public partnerships. It seems like it's a fig leaf just to get toll bridges into Kentucky, and fuck the toll bridges. Fuck the toll bridges. I love driving over the bridge and not having to slow down and pay a goddamn toll. I love that. And we have the money, and we need to do better. We could just, cut out the corruption. You want to know where the money's going to come from? Well, the 20% cut out the corruption. That's where the money comes from. There's plenty of ways buy 10 gas stations, buy KFC, buy Humana, buy some car insurance. I think we should have a public option for car insurance. It would be dirt cheap if the state of Kentucky offered us car insurance instead of having to go through these private fucking, insurance industries. And that's mandated, right? That's mandated against you. So people who bitch about Obamacare, who don't bitch about car insurance, you're being a hypocrite. You're being a hypocrite. And so we're going to come back more. I'm going to talk more about the heroin bill. This should have been all about the heroin bill. But in the meantime, drink your, your Southern Pecan, Lazy Magnolia, Mississippi's brewery. Now, fuck Mississippi. I don't even like alcohol. Alcohol is like, it's stout. It's got a good, for a beer, it's okay. But it just tastes nasty. I mean, it's rotted fucking pecans. Hey, I'm going to take a bunch of pecans and rot them forever and put, stir in some, flavorings, some hops. You want some? What, rotten pecans? Yes! Give me some rotten pecans. Give me some of that rotten barley juice. Yum, yum, yum. Alright, I'm going on and on, because, I don't know how to end this. So, Frankfurt is passing a lot of bullshit coming up after this. Occupy, Legendary, Hudson, Kentucky, Jonathan Masters, Southern Pecan, Lazy Magnolia, Bluegrass, Kentucky.